Okay, so I've had some email requests about calculating skewness using MATLAB. So I'm just going to run through hopefully what's going to be a quick tutorial on sort of some hints and tips of how to do that. What I want you to do first is use the Computer Practical Excel spreadsheet here to help us describe this. So I have that open already. Let me just find it. Here we go. Where are you? There you are. And what we have here is, under the calculations tab, is the 3 calculations that you need to translate into MATLAB as part of your assignment, and you need the values out of them as well. So graphic mean, standard deviation, reasonably straightforward. However, some people are coming under problems here because we're actually multiplying these equations by another number which we're not seeing in these equations above, so it's slightly more complicated, and we're multiplying, and we're dividing what we have fractions in which we're calculating something on the bottom of the fraction, which is different as well. Okay. So what I've done is I've taken the, you can't see them in this because I've just downloaded it here, but what I've done is I've taken the values for D5, D16, D50, D84, D84 and D90, and I have loaded them into MATLAB, and I've created a variable called all samples, and then using my MATLAB script, I have named each of the columns the correct sort of value. Okay, so if I open up all samples here, I've said that column 1 is the sample number. So when you're actually working out the stuff for your the samples for your assignment, you're going to have more than 3 samples, but so you have sample number in the first column, I've got D5 in the second, D16 in the third, D4 in the D16 in the fourth column, and so on to D95. And the reason that I've named these here is so that when I'm writing out the equations later on, it's much easier than writing all samples. Instead of writing all samples, open bracket, colon, comma 2, close bracket, all I have to do is write D5. Okay, so that makes life easier, and that's one of the reasons that coding's so useful when we're working with big data sets, or more than one value at a time. And so what we want to do really is find a way to translate this equation into MATLAB. And what I recommend you do is separate it out into 2 chunks first of all. So this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to calculate this half, which will then show you how to calculate the whole thing. Okay, now first of all, let's concentrate on the fraction here. Okay, and we'll split it into 2 halves, the top part of the fraction and the bottom part of the fraction. So the top half, if we put it out into MATLAB, it looks like this. So D16 plus D84 plus, minus 2 times D50. Now if you're unsure whether you need parentheses, I recommend trying them out and seeing how putting the parentheses changes your outcome. Okay, so if I know writing it out like this gives these answers, so what it does is it takes, if I just look at all samples, it takes D16, which is for me column 3 here, so it takes all these values and it adds all the D16s to the D84s in column 5, and then it subtracts 2 times D50, which is my column 4. Okay, so it's doing three calculations in one, if you like, okay, because this is a matrices, and a matrix, this is a matrix, sorry, and then more than one matrix is a matrices. So this is a matrix because there's more than one row and more than one column, okay, and it says 3 times 6 here because we have 3 rows and 6 columns, okay. Now if we want to see how parentheses can affect this, the outcome of this top equation, we can put some parentheses in, and what you'll see here is that the values aren't actually changed. And what if we put in parentheses here? Again, you see that the values aren't changed, and that's because MATLAB itself works out that the multiplication goes first, so it will calculate 2 times D50, and then it will subtract it from these two columns added together. But what we'll see in a little bit is that MATLAB doesn't work everything out by itself, so we do have to give it some guidance. So that's the top part of the equation, and the bottom part is D84 minus D16. So again, what it's doing is it's a matrix calculation where it's taking D84, which is all the columns here in D5, in the 5th column, and subtracting the D16, which is column 3, from these values. Okay, so it's doing it row by row. So it's saying 3.518 minus 2.872, and then it's doing 2.925 minus 2.523, and these are the answers here per row. Right. So then if we put this together and we take D16 plus D84 minus 2 times D50 divided by D84 minus D16, see what we get. So we actually get an error message here, and that's because it's saying that the matrices must agree, so they need to agree, and that just means that when we are dividing and multiplying using matrices or within a matrix, you need to have the matrix dimensions need to agree. And so what we don't have an agreement here because we have 6 columns and 3 rows. But that doesn't really matter to us, because actually what we're asking it to do is to calculate this, the top part of the fraction, which we've done over here, and we get these 3 values out, and then divide it by the bottom part of the fraction, which we've done here. So what we need to tell MATLAB to do is to divide the outcome of the top equation, so for example 0.04 needs to be divided by 0.646, and then minus 0.402 needs to be divided by 0.402, and so on and so forth. So we need to tell it to divide the outcomes of the top part of the fraction by the bottom part of the fraction, row by row. And the way that you do that is you put a dot in the front of the divide sign, okay, and that tells MATLAB, I'd like you to do the divisions row by row. Okay, and what you see is if you run that again, then you will get the correct answer. However, parentheses then become important. So what we need to do is separate the top part of the fraction from the bottom part of the fraction. So you'll see that if you just put the bottom part in brackets, we'll get a different answer. And if we put the top part in brackets, we will get a different answer again. Okay, so what you need to do is go through and check the correct. You can check that MATLAB is calculating these correctly, because you can calculate this part of the fraction and know what each row is, and you can calculate the bottom part of the fraction and calculate what each row is, and you can check that the answers that are coming out from your matrices division here is in fact correct. Okay, so that's for you to do, to check. You need to be confident that you're understanding what it is that you're calculating and what's coming out of your calculations. Now that's talking about this part of the fraction, the calculation, this is the fraction, but then we also have this multiplication of 0.5. So let's just consider that for a moment. So if we take 0.5 and we times it by our equation, you'll see that we get 3 values come out of this, okay? And that's because you have already calculated these row by row. You can also, you'll see, tell the multiplication to be row by row, and you'll get exactly the same outcome, okay? What you can't do is have the division not row by row, because what it'll do is do a matrix multiplication where it will times, because you have 3 rows and 3 rows, it will create 3 rows and 3 columns and the wrong calculation. So it's worth kind of understanding and working through the different options of how the commands that you give MATLAB will change the outcome of your equations. Okay, so my best advice is to work through the calculations section by section, so you can troubleshoot and be sure of yourself that you're using the right values and that you're calculating the right values. And only then, once you've worked it out for one row and you're confident that it's correct, only then do you work it out for all your samples. Okay, and then once you have your skewness values calculated, you can go to your skewness table in the computer practical lecture, which is under lectures, under Suter Jackson's lectures, and you can work out where your values are falling. So remember, what I've just worked through here is only a small part, and I'm not necessarily telling you the correct, I'm showing you the correct way to do it, but I'm showing you how to work it out for yourself. So don't just copy exactly what I've done. You need to work through and understand how the equations you're putting in are calculating the answers for you. Okay, so think about what is it that's being divided by what within the matrix. If you've got further questions, do get in contact via email, but I'm hoping that this tutorial will answer the questions that have been put forward to me already. Okay, thanks for listening.